Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're doing what we do best, taking some incredibly complex, groundbreaking ideas and unpacking them into a clear, structured journey. We are looking at a fascinating manuscript today, and it makes a really bold attempt. It basically tries to take egalitarianism, which, people usually just debate as a moral preference, and transform it into a closed, absolutely non-negotiable deduction. And to do this, the author uses this brilliant engineering metaphor to describe how we actually build our societies. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap. We'll start with this core idea of moving from iron to steel in social justice. Then we'll look at the famous Rawlsian blueprint, check out two missing joints in that architecture, and see how the author upgrades the whole thing into a deductive machine. Finally, we'll extend the veil and run the machine. First up, Section 1, Justice, Iron to Steel, the Metallurgy of Society. So the author uses this incredibly powerful metaphor right out of the gate. Justice is literally the building material of social order. Think about it. Just like a bridge needs the exact right materials to survive the wind in its own weight, a society needs a specific kind of justice to survive the everyday stresses of human cooperation. Purely formal justice, where you just have, say, the basic rule of law and contracts, well, the author likens that to iron. Sure, it's strong when compressed, but it's super brittle under tension, and if you leave it exposed to the elements, unbounded inequality acts exactly like rust. It just corrodes the structure from the inside out. You lose social trust, you get political capture, the whole shebang. But what happens when you refine iron? You get steel. By alloying justice with equality, you create this egalitarian structure. It's not just about morals, it's about giving society the resilient strength it needs to actually survive the real-world stresses of inequality and division.
Moving on to Section 2, the Rawlsian blueprint, the foundations of fairness.
Now, to really understand how the author builds this resilient steel structure, we have to look at the foundational blueprint of this entire project, and that comes from the highly influential political philosopher John Rawls. You might have heard of his original position. The author clarifies that this isn't some historical fiction where people literally sat around a campfire drafting laws. Actually, it's a formal device of representation. It's a way to model conditions of fair choice. Think of it like a thought experiment. If you had to select the rules for a brand new society, but you wanted to completely eliminate any unfair biases or personal advantages, how would you even do that? Well, you do it by using the veil of ignorance. This is a hypothetical screen that hides all morally arbitrary knowledge from the decision makers. Imagine standing behind this veil. You don't know your class, you don't know your social status, your race, or even your natural talents. You have absolutely zero idea where you are going to end up in the society you're designing. Because of that, you are forced to be completely impartial. I mean, you literally can't rig the rules in your favor because you don't know what your favor actually is. And out of this veil comes Rawls's famous difference principle. Here's the basic logic flow. Step 1. You identify inequalities that are based on morally arbitrary things, like, say, being born into a ton of wealth or having a naturally high IQ. Step 2. You demand that any inequality in the society must be justified to the people at the very bottom of the social ladder. And step 3, you only permit that inequality if it actually maximizes the position of those least advantaged people. Essentially, inequality is only allowed if it acts as an incentive that ends up helping the poorest and most vulnerable more than strict equality ever would. But here's where things get really interesting. Section 3, two missing joints, where the blueprint stops short. So the crucial point the manuscript makes is that while Rawls's architecture is brilliant, it stops just short of being a fully airtight deduction. It leaves two unfinished joints, totally open to attack from critics who demand hard proof rather than just appealing ideas. Take a look at joint 1. Rawls suggested that natural talents should be viewed as a common asset, but he based this mostly on moral intuition about what people would agree to. And frankly, critics can easily just say, well, I don't share that intuition, and the argument stalls. Then there's joint 2. Rawls applied his strict rules about inequality, mostly to income and wealth flows, but for some reason, he exempted the fundamental legal structure of property rights itself. It's like, if you're only regulating the flow of water but you completely ignore who actually owns the pipes, your system has a massive leak. Let's see how we fix that. Section 4, the deductive machine, upgrading the argument. This is exactly where the author steps in to weld those joints shut, that transform the original position from just a neat thought experiment into a rigorous mathematical-style deductive machine. To secure that first unfinished joint about natural talents, the author builds two massive pillars. On the empirical side, they look at actual science. Population genetics shows us that high cognitive ability is polygenic, meaning it's made up of thousands of genetic variants drawn from a massive collective population-wide gene pool. You didn't invent your genes, right? Then, on the logical side, they introduce the principle of derivative ownership. This is just a basic consistency requirement. You cannot claim exclusive total ownership over a resource that you didn't create, didn't earn, and simply drew from a collective pool. When you put these two pillars together, it proves, literally proves, not just suggests, that our natural talents genuinely are a common asset. With that upgraded foundation, we now have this fully functioning veil inference machine, and it operates in 3 strict steps. Step 1, identify a morally arbitrary fact about a person. Step 2, shove that fact right behind the veil of ignorance so the decision maker cannot know it. Step 3, because of the sheer panic and radical uncertainty of not knowing where they'll end up, a rational actor will always choose disparity-minimizing principles to protect themselves from a worst-case scenario. It's a closed loop. If you feed any arbitrary trait into this machine, it automatically cranks out a non-negotiable egalitarian outcome. Let's move to Section 5 and see how this builds. Extending the veil, running the machine. Okay, what happens when we start feeding completely new dimensions of society into this newly upgraded machine? The author throws out a highly provocative question to really stretch the capabilities of the veil. What if you didn't know whom God loves? This introduces what the manuscript calls the theological veil. Think about it. If we extend the veil's catalog to hide divine favor, the decision makers have no clue if God's grace correlates with being rich, poor, virtuous, or suffering. Because they don't know who is spiritually favored, they absolutely cannot risk creating a society that crushes the poor, just in case the poor happen to be the ones most beloved by God. So the rational choice, once again, remains a very cautious egalitarianism. The true beauty of running this through the machine is that it proves religious and secular frameworks can arrive at the exact same egalitarian conclusions, and they don't even have to debate or endorse any specific theology to get there. The structure holds up for absolutely everyone. And that brings us to our conclusion for today's explainer. I want to wrap up with this incredible quote from the text, that the structure of the answer is non-negotiable does not close the conversation. It finally gives the conversation a fixed point around which to turn. The author isn't saying that all debate is suddenly over forever. They're saying we finally have a solid steel foundation to actually build upon. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. Is justice truly a fixed, non-negotiable deduction? And if it is, how radically would this blueprint change the way property, wealth, and power operate in your own society right now? Thanks so much for joining me, and keep exploring.